Hello, and welcome to the Wade Borth podcast. I'm your host, Wade Borth, and in every episode, my goal is to get you to think differently about how money works and ultimately to empower you to take control of your money and your personal financing system. Welcome to the Wade Borth podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me today, author and one of my great friends, Mary Jo Irmen. Thanks, Mary Jo, for joining me.
Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think you bring up a really good point. And again, we segue to so many different ways. So hopefully people are keeping up with us and having, but this is, the issues that farmers have are not specific to farmers. They're just bigger numbers. I think, and we've talked about this many times, is that people that are caught up, and I got clients that are real estate investors, and it's all the same thing, is that if they don't understand the banking system, there's a saying that says, if you don't know who the fool in the room is, guess who's the fool? And I think banks have a lot of people in that situation. Farmers, how much money flows through a farmer's hands that he never sees or gets to keep?
Depending on the size of the farmer. I've got farmers with operating notes of $3 million a year. Operating. Right. That's just fuel, fertilizer, chemical, hired help, land rent. That's just recurring costs every year. That is not our tractor payment and our land payment, and that's just operating. Right. And so and then I've got farmers with operating of $2,000 a year. So it really depends on the size of the operation. But when people see a tractor running down the road, they don't understand that's a $500,000 piece of equipment, or like right now, a combine, $500,000 to $600,000 for that piece of equipment that I'm going to use 3 months out, or 2 months out of the year, maybe. And then it sits the rest of the time. And so it's not like, and they look at it like that a piece of equipment is making me money. I look at real estate like that house is making me money because somebody's living in it and actually paying the bill. And on the farmer side, it's just a whole different thought process. They think that piece of equipment's making them money. You needed it to make money, but if it was making you money, it would be in use 12 months out of the year, and you'd be doing some custom work, and then that would be possibly making you money. But it's just a tool to get your stuff harvested to make the money. Your crop needs to make enough to pay for it, where that would be like saying my house needs to pay for, no, the rental needs to pay for mine.
Exactly. But I think the idea is that all that money flow, and Nelson talks about this in his book too. He says money has to reside somewhere and it has to flow. And so again, if it's real estate people, it's farming, just doctors, somebody that's punching a clock, it doesn't really make any difference. The fact that when money flows by using Wells Fargo or any other banking operation, the money resides with them and they have control over it and they're making a profit from it. I think ultimately what I'm trying to do with agents and with clients is to teach them that there's a better way. What if you could control that banking function in your life? Now, is it simple? Yes. Is it easy? I don't know. It's super hard, but it takes time, money, and discipline and that's what you have to commit to, because again, nothing worthwhile is going to happen real easy. I don't. Yeah. Again,
well, so here's a good one-liner, Wade. My client said it's really easy when you quit making it so hard.
Is that the truth?
It is, because we want to make this difficult. It's not difficult.
No.
But I just got done recording my podcast and I was talking about the use it or lose it chapter. And we so many times read the book and then we forget why we have it. And we have to stay educated on it. We have to stay educated on why do we have this policy? What can we do with the policy? What are ways to create cash flow? We have to continually be looking at that. We can't just go, this is what I compare it to. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to go from a low fat diet to a keto diet, and you got to have fat, but you just read the book and then you're like, okay, I'm going to go eat keto. And all of a sudden you don't know what to make and you don't know what oils and what nuts and what food to eat because you're so ingrained in this low fat process. If you don't have somebody to help you, how are you supposed to get there? And how are you supposed to learn about the banking system and find the truths if you're not researching them? And most people don't even, it's not that they don't care. It's that nobody has talked to them about it.
Correct. I've said many times that it's not the product, it's the process and how we think, right? And I relate it back to what I call a craftsman or a carpenter, someone that really knows their trade. I can go out and buy all the same tools. I can have the hammer, I can have the drill, I can have all the same tools that a craftsman carpenter has. But does that make me a craftsman?
Right.
Absolutely not. What makes him a craftsman is experience, it's education, it's continue to try to be better in your trade. And I just see a lot of agents out there and a lot of clients that, again, they go out and they buy the product and think it's going to change their life. But what have they done internally to change their own life? What habits have they changed? What discipline have they applied that they haven't applied before? That's what's going to change their lives. We're just providing what the greatest and the process to marry them together. And now it's our job to empower them to start taking control of that process in their life. Because ultimately, I don't want to become their banker. I don't want to take from Wells Fargo being their banker to Wade being their banker. I want to empower them to be their own banker. And that's what Nelson's book talks about.
Yeah.
Is becoming
and
their own banker.
In the Use It or Lose It chapter, he said the infinite banking concept is dealing with a totally different paradigm. This amounts to a personal monetary system. That's simple. He outlined the entire book in 2 sentences. Yeah. And we have to remember that when we are talking about IBC. It's not about a rate of return. It's not about a life insurance policy. It is about a personal monetary system. It's about taking control, and it's about thinking differently and creating cash value. And that is why it is called the infinite banking concept. It's a concept. Yep. It's not, so many people think it's a one and done, and it's a concept. It's a thought process. Yep. It's like a system.
And going back to that to Nelson's book, and if we go back to the very first page of the introduction, which I have to tell a quick story how funny that is. I read Nelson's book 60 times. I think I maybe read the introduction maybe once or twice. And we were doing a book study, and somebody says, "Oh, we should do the introduction." I'm like, "Oh, it's just the introduction." And there was like, the introduction tells you everything you need to know. It's a page and a half to explain the whole book. Mm-hmm. People think people in our industry, in the life insurance industry, thinks it's a concept to sell more life insurance. I said, no, it's a way to take control of the banking function in your life. Just like he said in the Use It or Lose It. How do you say it? It's a personal banking system.
It's right? A personal monetary system.
Personal monetary system. Thank you. Let's not use banking. I'm sure some regulator will hear banking and go crazy.
It amounts to a personal monetary system.
Yeah.
And I think that people forget that too in this world of, and I don't want to call it IBC because it's not the world of IBC. Nelson didn't have bank loans. And so right now, all we hear about is go to the bank, the interest rates are lower. Go to the bank, the interest rates are lower. That's not a personal monetary system. No. That's you still using the banking system. And as Nelson would say, you're part of the problem. And I think in this world of the thought process of IBC, because so many people aren't teaching IBC. They're selling you life insurance, but they're not teaching IBC. We are combining the two. We're going to the bank and we're borrowing money. And I myself will teach you that ideal, but you have a choice to say, I'm going to go to the bank and borrow cheap money, or I'm going to have my own monetary system and control it myself, which is then going to slow down how fast I can accumulate things that create cash flow. And as an example, we bought a rental property, October, and I used cash to do that, money from the policy. And I did not go to the bank, even though the bank interest rates are lower. I still have not refied to get my cash out to buy another rental property. I could do, it would be painful. I would be subject to the bank. The bank could call that note. I would not be in control anymore. Yeah. And I have thought about it. And yesterday I talked to a client who's doing that same thing. He's borrowing money from the bank to buy their first rental property. And we were talking about how painful that process is, how expensive in closing costs. He has a $283,000 property, and $10,000 of that is fees and charges. And, you got to pay this person this much and this person this much to do what? He was drilling them about the charges, and they're like, it's just to keep that person busy. That's the kind of crap we're paying for. And that's the kind of stuff Nelson said, no, you take control of that system. And so many of us who didn't train with Nelson want to expand so quickly into the cash flow and start creating that cash flow and financing all these things. Nelson didn't do that because he remembered the pain of the 80s and being caught with 23% interest. He did it slowly with his monetary system. He didn't owe money on those properties, and he didn't have a ton of properties that I'm aware of because it wasn't what he believed. So the concept is also, it's your monetary system, but are you going to contribute to the problem? Because that would set him off. If he knew today how many people in the last 2-3 years are saying, go to the bank, go to the bank. You can go to the bank, but it's an option. You buy it with cash and you do it slow, or you go to the bank and you do it fast and you have the risk and you lose the control.
Yeah. And I think it's important for clients and really everybody that's going to listen to this to understand that it is a process. It doesn't happen overnight where you go, hey, I'm going to go from borrowing money from the bank to buy rentals or do whatever it is that you're going to build this cash flow system with. It's not going to happen overnight, because if you heard Nelson talk, I think it took him 12 or 15 years. 13, thank you, it's right in the middle there. 13 years to divorce himself from the snakes and the dragons, as he called it. So it is a process. Don't think you have to go from that point to never using the bank the next day, because it does take. It's hard to. It's like it relates back to somebody that may be addicted to a substance. If you go cold turkey, you still have that effect of it for a while. You have to take a while to, and you talk about that in your book, right? So you're not going to be able to do this overnight. It is a process of getting out of the banking system, because ultimately, what is the most important thing you're getting from applying what Nelson talked about in his book? You're getting freedom. You're taking control. Freedom and control are the biggest things we talk about. Notice we never said rate of return or anything else. It is freedom and control.
Yep. And I always say it's liquidity, control, and guarantees. And if you can find that somewhere else, you let me know where it's at. All three things at the same time. You can't find it anywhere else.
And then when we look at how does life insurance married with the IBC concept, how come that's such a good marriage? Is because if we apply this personal financing system to our lives, we need a guaranteed bucket of money, like you're talking about, that will allow us. Now, again, part of what we have to do is be very disciplined. We can't be very poor customers of our own financing system. We have to be good customers of our financing system. We have to treat it with the respect that it deserves. And that's the important part. Is that, and I think a lot of people believe that, oh, I'll get this and then it's going to change my whole life. If you were a bad credit risk at the bank, you should be a bad credit risk at your own bank as well. You need to get that stuff cleaned up, and that takes the discipline. And so I think it's understanding that it is a journey, it's a process. And again, it's our job to help empower you to take control of that function. It's not our job to do it for you. We're here to be, in essence, your coach. Because you and I have had this conversation many times about, if we're going to buy something, do we go to the bank? How do we finance it? I have to say that I'm as guilty as anybody about going to the bank because using cheap money. We've had those conversations, and I'm making that transition, and it's not happening overnight, but it is happening. So let's get out of the banking, the current banking system as it is, because who does that benefit? We all think, well, it benefits us, but because we're only paying 3.25% on our mortgage. Do we count in what the $10 or $15 or $20,000 of closings cost us? Is that included in that cost? How about the time? If you bill yourself out like an attorney does at so many dollars per hour, what does it cost you to get a mortgage anymore? And then the time, and then that last drop of blood they want at the very end. All that frustration and all that distraction and all that time, what's that all worth? Versus saying, hey, I have the ability to do this myself. I'm a good credit risk to my family banking system, and I'm going to make that payment back. I'm going to set it up. And I don't know if you walk your clients through that, is by having a system set up that, okay, I got a loan. We have to write documents saying, here's what our loan is. Here's a loan document. Here's an amortization schedule, and actually make payments to your own bank. Because if you're not, like Nelson says, you're walking out with the product out the back door. Your system's not going to be alive very long if you don't treat it like any other bank. You have to love it. family and love yourself more than you love Wells Fargo.
Yeah, and that's all part of the concept.
Right.
Like it's not a just buy a policy. You're going to have multiple policies. You're going to build it over time. I have vehicle loans because I don't want to wrap that money up when I could be buying farm ground, or I could be buying rental properties, or I could be starting other businesses. It's going to take me time to make that transition. But after the last property we bought, that transition's happening because the pain is still very fresh a year later. The stupidity of questions, which I get, the bank has to ask those questions. The regulators need those questions for the loan. The questions, the more, and I should, if they don't even try to understand what business you're in so that the common sense kicks in. They just go down the checklist. Now, if we put ourselves in the position of the bank and say, Wade, I'm going to lend you money. Am I going to do a little due diligence and ask some stupid questions? Yep, I'm going to. Those questions you might think are stupid, but I now have my money at risk. So is the bank out of line asking those? Nope. Are they out of line charging me all these fees? Is it out of line? When we closed on our rental property, it was all cash. There were no fees, right? Everything's typically wrapped up into your loan. So you don't really pay attention to every little detail. So we have to go to the title company to close and they want $75. I said, why am I paying the title company $75 for closing? Oh, it's basically to use their room. No, can we do this virtually then so we don't have to use their room? $75? Who's not making $75? The lovely lady sitting across the table from me managing all the paperwork. She's not making $75 an hour and getting that money. These title companies, when you think about like right now, how many people are closing in a day and they're making $75 per person? Because it wasn't $75 for me. And I got to split that with the seller who was in the same room. No, we both paid $75, I'm sure. I wouldn't know that for exact, but nonetheless, I have gone to the bank. I have gone through the pain so I can slowly grow the cash flow on the other side, or I can grow the cash flow on the other side. Now I have decided I have to answer the question, how quickly do I want to grow that? My farmers didn't start with 500 head of cattle and 5,000 acres. That didn't happen. I have lots of farmers that have started and they've got 40 acres and they started I have business owners. You don't open your doors and get flooded with income. You got to wait 5 years typically before you can even make a profit in any normal business. And so that all started slow, but so many people look at the book and go, oh, I want it tomorrow. You can't have it tomorrow.
That's the whole point, is that it is a process. It's a lifelong process, quite frankly, that people have to apply this. Because Nelson, one of his things was you have to think long term. The other one was don't be afraid to capitalize. That's where I see people's biggest fears. They're afraid to capitalize and they want something in a very short term manner. And
so even in the this is going to turn into a book study. And just because I just did this myself. But this is interesting. And I have read this book a bazillion times. We've done our book study on it. And I caught two things in this chapter that I have not caught before. And one of them is Nelson talks about EVA, economic value added. Okay. And how that got to be a big thing. Then the Fortune magazine did an article. Then they did a follow-up article that said, EVA works, but not if you make these common mistakes. 1, you don't make it a way of life. We just talked about that. You try to start too fast. We just talked about that. Right. Your boss lacks conviction, meaning you, the owner of the policy, lack conviction on IBC. You're still like not sure. You go talk to somebody and they're just not certain that you are right. But yet they don't know anything about it and you are the expert in that matter. And then the other two are managers fuss too much. So what are we fussing about? Rates of return? Are we fussing about minor things that do not matter? Nelson was a master at not fussing and pointing that out if you were. And then training gets short shrift. I don't know what that means. But the 4 above that are exactly, why is IBC going to fail for you? Because of you. The biggest risk, people always say, Mary Jo, what's the risk? You. human nature. If anything kills this process, it's going to be you.
Yeah, 100% agree, because it is, again, it's a lifelong process. And again, if you're trying to take shortcuts, it's not going to get anywhere. So you have to be committed. You have to say, this is what I'm going to do. And part of where my belief system is that I want it to benefit me, but more importantly, I want to benefit that next generation or multiple generations down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want my son to grow up and be 35 years old and finally discover this idea that was out there, because anything else, that information's already out there. And it's just, when are we going to discover it, and when are we going to apply it to what we do?
Mm-hmm.
And so my job is to empower him to understand that knowledge is within you. Let's cultivate that and have you understand it. So you don't have to wait until you're 35 or 40 years old. In my case, before I really started understanding and get it. And Nelson's case was the same way, right? So he was always mad. And he says, why are these people hiding it from me? And why didn't they tell me sooner?
They were hiding because there was no internet. Something that I've talked about too is we couldn't find, if you didn't know somebody, even look at what's going on in the world today. So many things are being exposed on so many levels because we have the ability and the technology to do that. When we grew up, you had to get up to change the channel, and there were 3, and one was like Sesame Street or cartoons or whatever. There were only really 2 channels you were getting news from. And unless you knew somebody that belonged to an organization, like Nelson belonged to the Mises Institute.
Yeah.
And so that he was getting that information. But if you didn't know somebody that belonged to Mises, how did you know Mises even existed? It was a much harder world to get this information. That's why it's spreading like wildfire today.
Yeah, and I think the downside of the internet, at least with this information, is there's a thing called paradox of choice. We have so many choices of what we can believe and understand. And I think it's imperative to people to really look at what are their core values? What do they truly believe in? And then how does what we teach align with what their core values are?
Mm-hmm. I don't know that that's a downside, Wade.
No,
I don't look at that as an upside, that we are having to discern between, and people typically say, and I'm not challenging you on that, I'm just changing the vocabulary because I know what you meant. I'm just changing the vocabulary a little bit because people go, oh, the internet's so bad. How are you using it? That's like saying a car is dangerous. If you drive like a maniac and drunk, of course a car is going to be dangerous. But we have to, and that's why we're fighting, because everybody is discerning it differently. Just like everybody, you could have 10 people in the room that read the Bible, and every one of them has a different message from the Bible, because everybody is going to look at it differently where they're at in life. But that is why we are here as teachers, to help you discern it. If you're trying to discern it based off of some Yahoo on the internet, and you have no idea if that person's a practitioner, they're not using the right language, they're not using the right terminology, they're not explaining it correctly, you don't know that unless you come and visit with one of us that's a practitioner, and we're like, they were right, but here's the truth of how that works.
I think that's a good point of clarification. I wasn't saying the internet's bad. I'm just saying that there's so much there that people can get overwhelmed with a lot of different opinions. And again, one thing I think it's important is for the client, for whoever's reading on the internet, to understand what their core set of values are, and then understand what was the IBC core set of values, and we can help them understand that and make sure that they're in alignment. That's all I was saying, is that it's like, because the internet's any other tool. A tool is just a tool. If we're using a hammer as a screwdriver, as a hammer, that rarely ever turns out good. And so that's really what we have to help people understand. Again, it goes back to the idea of we're empowering people to take control of that, of their banking function, their lives, and trying to find that freedom and control they're looking for. That's ultimately what we want to do. And that has to be done internally on their side. And we're just here to help empower them to get there.
Yep.
I think if that's the end of the story, I think that would be a good place to stop. It's not about the product. It's not about us. It's about our clients and what they want to accomplish, what they want to achieve, and what they're willing to do to change and get out of that pain. Because people are in financial pain because they're in servitude to the banks. They have this pain of, not knowing, having that certainty that we talk about all the time. And when you don't have certainty, you have stress, and stress causes so many health issues and so much death that it's incredible. And so we're trying to help alleviate some of that now. So I think Nelson, to me, he was a great storyteller. He was a great teacher because he never gave you an exact answer. He's like, "Oh, it's in the book," or "Go read the book," he always would say. And it was frustrating, but it was also very illuminating from the standpoint. You had to go and study and understand it. And then when you would ask him a question, he'd tell you it's in the book. Then you can say, "Wow, I read that in the book. Help me understand." And then he would open up.
But we don't give our clients exact answers either. A client will call or a new person will email, "What do I do?" I don't know what you do. I don't know what you have going on. I can't give you an exact answer. And if somebody does, you better be running. It's not a sales technique to get you on the phone with me. It's doing you a favor to help you. And we didn't, because we were so excited, we wanted all the information. But had Nelson given us all that information, we wouldn't have remembered it anyway.
We would have found very little value in it. Right. Yeah. I had a client actually yesterday. We're having a conversation with him. He's like, "Should I use this to pay off my house?" I'm like, same thing, right? Depends. What do you want? I said, personally, I have a hierarchy what I want paid off, what I want to take control of my family. And again, I say paid off, that's not fair because we finance everything we do. So do I finance it with the Borth Family Bank or am I financing it with Wells Fargo? Those are the two sides I have. And I'm like, I'm taking over more and more of that. My house is very low on that list. But eventually it's going to be there. But right now it's low on the list. So again,
because you have that transition. It's a transition to make out of the banking system. It's not an overnight.
But that's my personal values. Somebody else might say that having a house under my control and my banking system, my financing system is the most important thing. Then by all means, use the IBC, use the policy to pay off your house if that's the most important thing. And that's the point I try to get across. I can't tell you what's most important for you. You have to I'll help you figure it out, but you have to figure that out yourself. Well, thanks, Mary Jo. That was lively. We could go on for hours. If you're enjoying this podcast or know anyone else that might be interested, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and please leave a review. This will help this podcast reach and help more people by ranking higher in searches and ultimately help more people get out of financial bondage. And don't be afraid to share this podcast with your friends and family, because we can be easily found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.